And without learning all that I've learned, well, as I said, I wouldn't be owning a business. I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't have a nice office, a nice house, a nice car. I wouldn't have any of it if it
Mm.
wasn't for the discipline, that everything that I learned throughout my journey.
Hello and welcome to Share.care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
G'day, Jaleel. How are you?
I am very good, thank you. Yourself?
Very good, thank you. Just having a bit of I was getting the pronunciation. Pronunciation?
It took about 20 tries, but that'll do.
So I was just making sure I got Jaleel's name pronounced correctly, which is Jaleel Siddiqui, who we have here on the show today. How are you today?
I'm really, really good.
Yeah.
Nice morning in Liverpool.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I'm in the other side of the country, Australia, other side of the empire,
Yeah,
I should say, other side of the empire, still part of the
yeah,
colony
yeah.
here in Australia.
The boys.
Exactly, and we think, here we go, well, you've actually got the world the wrong way. It's this way. We're up the top. You guys are. That's how we look at it.
Okay, fine.
Well, how do we know? How do we know? Is a question I have. But yeah, interesting. From that perspective, though, the audience who we do have here is Jaleel Siddiqui, and he's a fitness industry expert, and he works with clients. He worked in the fitness area, but then he found that helping people with the mental aspects had a massive transformation on their life. And so, from that, Jaleel, when we look at the situation of the world today, we've got to this place where we're talking about what is manly, and a lot of men feeling lost, lonely, and not having a place in society. What have you seen from your perspective? Or what have you noticed? We'll start more broadly and look at some of the detail.
100% in regards to men. This is something I've mentioned quite a lot recently. Is I find that a lot of us, including myself, we're kind of stuck in what I'd call like a victimized mentality. In a sort of place where we were sort of, even for me, when I was at my heaviest, I don't know what metric you used over in Australia, but I was a really, really big lad, weighing over 20 stone, which is like, I don't know, in kilos, it's a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of men find themselves in a position where they don't have the tools in place to become men, or they're not told what tools are in place to become men either. So in the example of, they're not taught how to be disciplined, they're not taught how to be resilient, they're not taught what it means to even be a man. And I find that it really did anger me at the time, because I was like, all these wrong things are happening to me and I don't understand, what can I put in place to deal with it? I just didn't know. And no one is taught how to be a man, especially if you don't have a male role model in your life either.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from that perspective, because when you talk about, and I've often wondered this, relate it to participation trophies as well. that
Mm.
when you talk about disciplined and you know, from my perspective, I mean, my parent, particularly my mum, was very strict. I had to when I joined the army, I could make my bed army style better than the army. That's because I had to make my bed with 45-degree folded sheets, and it had to be perfectly flat. My socks had to go in exactly the right spot, stacked completely. My mum's a different person now, but that was just something that she did back then. But I often wonder about that, and my dad said that as well. Going to the army and having that discipline there, he said, and I don't notice it because you know you don't notice from yourself. But he said he
Yeah.
noticed a big change of having that discipline. Do you know from what is your take on that? With everyone gets a trophy and it's okay to, or do we need that structure? Do men, particularly men, need that structure?
Well, firstly, when it comes to, I know you mentioned the army. I
Mm,
think that's a great place to start for a lot of people,
mm,
especially if you're starting at like really minimum levels of discipline, minimum levels of just say manliness.
mm,
I have a couple of clients in my program that they are the best performing clients, but they
mm,
have previously been in the army.
mm.
So that shows already to me what a level of discipline brings to, say, a fitness journey already. But
Yeah.
in regards to like participation trophies and things like that, if I was to be blunt about it, I think people just need to really get a grip. I think it's really unfair to let everyone think that they're winning in life, as I do think as men we do need a level of trauma, no matter how big or how small it may be, to actually build on from that and actually to become much stronger in the long term. And that doesn't mean trauma has to be, death of family members. Trauma can literally be maybe something so simple as, you know, being overweight and being ridiculed or bullied, for
Mm.
example.
It's an interesting what you're talking about there is having that level of discipline. And when we're talking about, because I do wonder about that with the participation trophies, and I haven't experienced that. My son's school that he goes to, I know it happens in some of the other schools, but his school is, well, it's a high-end private school to be honest, and
Yeah, yeah.
everything is scored. It's like but the reality is, if you're going out and it's not like it's not about being mean or anything, but if a company is advertising for one position and 20 people go for it, 19 are not going to
Hmm.
get it. It's
Yeah,
like, you're and it's not that you didn't do necessarily did a good job. And not that you're not a good person. You just might not be a
yeah,
good fit, might not be the right fit.
100%.
And so how does, if you've been taught, oh, just show up and everyone pats you on the back, um, that's going to be a really difficult thing to overcome as an adult when you've already got things ingrained. Is that your understanding as well, or what's your?
Well, yeah. Well, I mentioned to you before about this the victimized mentality, and that
Mhm.
if you bring up a really good point. Even in previously, a very long time ago now, when I was 17, 18, I started working for Amazon,
Yeah.
and they had a thing in place where you had to do a certain amount of parcels by a certain time, and
Mm.
you'd have a leaderboard of each and every person that had been doing the parcels, scanning the parcels, and the people who were at the bottom of the list were in the red zone.
Yeah.
And this then meant that they were actually at risk of losing their job, especially
Mm.
because they were agency staff. They could just be let go.
Yeah.
So after Christmas period, all the people who were in the red were let go,
Mm.
and it went crazy in the warehouse. Everyone was fuming, shouting, screaming, and in my mind, I was up near the top, and I was thinking to myself, "Well, why didn't you just work hard enough, or why didn't you just put in the effort? You know that you needed to if you wanted to keep your job at the time."
Yeah.
And there was literally about 30, 40 people
Mm.
going mental over this, and I was thinking, what in their lives have they actually been taught, like not to put in the hard work? Because some of the numbers that they were getting were atrocious.
Yeah.
I was like 4 or 5 times that number, and I
Yeah.
hated that job.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I performed well.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things too when you look at it in life. I mean, life doesn't always go the way that you want it to go. And sometimes, especially, if you a little bit later when you've got a family and things like that, you might not, have every opportunities, and you might have to do some things that you don't like to do. And is that part
100%.
of that, from when we look at it, and it's not about being stoic and just going, suffering in silence, but it's one of those things, because I wonder about it from the perspective of, when we look at how our body works with dopamine and serotonin, and I know they didn't know this years ago. Back in, and America gets credit for this, but they released the first feature-length animated movie, Walt Disney, Snow White. And in that movie, when Snow White's cleaning the house with the animals, she's singing "Whistle While You Work." Now, from that perspective, we know now, as soon as you think a happy thought, you start to produce dopamine and serotonin, which makes you feel good. And if we want to take, I like pop culture reference, so you're going to have to bear with that. But
That's okay.
we take it to Mary Poppins, and she says, every job that must be done is an element of fun. Find the fun, and the job's a game. Do we need that sort of, when you talk about, role modeling for men, which is, as you said, if I heard you correctly, is lacking. Is that, unless you've actually got that from your own, probably father and other figures that you had around you, but is that something we need to focus on, as well as going, hey, sometimes you have to do stuff, but if you actually get your head out of your proverbial and look around, you might find that there's something you could learn from this? Is that something that we need to include in this, What is Manly?
You can always learn from everybody. I think that's a really stoic quote anyway. But in regards to that, if you want a bit of pop culture, well, look how hard Walt Disney worked to be able to get his movies. How many yeses and nos? How many bankruptcies? How many challenges did he face? To make them movies in the first place. And yes, there's a lot of things that do drive us happiness, and we deserve happiness. Every single person deserves senses of happiness, but you've still got to be able to do things that need to get done. Whether that is to become a good role model for your children, whether that is go to work every single day to make sure that you provide for your family. These are things that have to be done, but this doesn't mean you can't have fun. And whether it be, for a lot of men, I see that a lot of them maybe don't even know their purpose. And without a purpose, then you don't know what your passion is. Then you don't understand, well, where can I go from here? And then they just seem to struggle then in a job they hate, realistically a family they hate, and the whole system has just gone all the way down.
When you talk about, because you talk about total mental performance, and you just mentioned purpose then, when someone's performing, the people that you've dealt with, the people that perform better or have a better, what I mean by that is that they have, say, better mental health, better attitude towards life. Is there a common link between having a purpose and having that state of mind?
Yeah. So what I always say, and I say this to my clients as well, when you start looking after your health and fitness, the things that are getting built are the discipline, the resilience, the mental toughness, the ability to do things when you don't feel motivated, and understanding the delayed gratification as well. When you start to learn all of these things, then that can then be applied in other areas of life. So I found, like, my clients, when they've lost weight, they're getting into shape, all of a sudden they start to realize, oh, maybe I want a change of career, or maybe they want to do better in my career. I had a client recently say that they'd actually fallen in love with their career. They were a lawyer, and they felt like they were falling in love with their career again, because now they were looking after more of their mental health with that, with the whole fitness side of things.
Wow.
So I would say looking after your health and fitness is the springboard that you should be doing. And if I was to bring it back to my own position, if I didn't start looking after my health and fitness, I wouldn't be owning a business right now. I wouldn't be here right now. To be honest, I'd probably be working.
You're clearly not 20 stone anymore.
Yeah. Well, clearly not. And that was a really, say, like, tough period for me as well, being at that weight. And without learning all that I've learned, well, as I said, I wouldn't be owning a business. I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't have a nice office, a nice house, a nice car. I wouldn't have any of it if it wasn't for the discipline, everything that I learned throughout my journey.
Yeah. And from that perspective, when you mentioned before about delayed gratification and linking that to your purpose as well, because I want to draw from Arnold Schwarzenegger here, and I'm trying to make a reference that
love it.
Yeah, is the atypical what manly is. But what I do want to draw from what he talked about, and this is where I'm coming back to this, every job that must be done has an element of fun. And because he talked about, when he'd go to the gym, all the other bodybuilders there would be complaining about doing more reps. And he said, I used to love doing it because I knew, and it's linking this back to the purpose, I knew where I was going, and I look at what I was doing and say, okay, I enjoy this because it's helping me get where I'm going. Is this a mindset that we need to be reframing for guys as well? Just going, hey, and I know it applies to both genders for everyone listening.
Yeah.
But this is asking the question, what is manly? Do we need to really instill that? Because we were talking about in the pre-show, and you and I, we've had a similar experience, and certainly for those that have listened to the women on this podcast, they've all talked about the empowerment of women wasn't disempowerment of men, but that seemed to be what has happened. So do we need to, from that perspective, encourage guys, hey, have a sense of purpose, but also too, on that journey, enjoy the journey while you're getting there?
100%. I think the first thing is that if you are struggling, it's very hard for someone right now, say there's a man who doesn't know what his purpose is, and he's sitting there and he's like, well, how do I find what my purpose is? And I understand the struggle, sitting there thinking, well, what is it now that I can do? What is it that I can offer to the world? And it can be a really stressful thing to even think about.
Yeah.
I always say to people in that case, well, then you've got to then put yourself in the best possible position to find your purpose. And that is then obviously, like, I would always recommend them through looking after yourself better. If you're looking after things like your sleep better, your fitness better, your nutrition better, all of a sudden you've maybe got more mental clarity. Then all of a sudden, then you can start thinking more about what you actually enjoy to do. Then you can think, okay, and purpose doesn't have to mean you're, a therapist, a coach. It can literally mean you can start your own clothing line. You could do anything with a higher purpose to help others. You could be a real estate agent that's helping other people find homes. You could, anything like this, you can find your purpose through that. I think that in regards to men embracing the journey, I think you should always love the journey that you go on, and you should always understand that it's going to take time. People find their purpose at different ages. I was really lucky that I found it about the age of 18, 19. I was really lucky. Don't get me wrong, that purpose has slowly changed and maneuvered over the years, but it's still held the same sort of basis. I'd say when it comes to the journey, just make sure that you know that this is a long-term plan. Never think to yourself that you're going to find something just as a quick fix. And I think in this day and age, I think a lot of people love a good quick fix, no matter what it is, whether it be losing weight, whether it be putting on muscle, whether it be earning money. People want it quick.
Turn this corner, there's 10 Ferraris.
Yeah. Literally, just understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take time.
Is that from that perspective? I want to come back. I do want to explore the quick fix type mentality, but I want to come back to a couple of things that I heard you say there. And you talked about what can I offer the world, and then you said about purpose. How can I help people? And you referenced help a few times. Is that something when you were looking at that for guys as well to look beyond yourself and go? Because I remember, for long-time listeners, you've heard this story before. But I was young. I was sitting in my car, and I'm older than I look. It had a tape deck in it, and I was, it was a song that I was listening to. Why Won't Anybody Love Me? And I was playing the song, crying my eyes out, rewinding it, playing it again, and it was all about me. Why won't anybody love me? And a few weeks
Yeah.
later, I'm not sure what was the driver, but I went out and I helped. There was a charity happening where they had this massive tent and they were feeding homeless people. And I went and volunteered for that. And that, while I was doing that, I felt amazing doing that. And do we need to, again, be educating guys? Hey, think above yourself. Is that where we find that purpose because you mentioned that a few times, what can I offer the world? How can I help?
Yes. Yeah. So I think, firstly, to the point of helping others, I think your purpose should be a higher purpose in regards to. Don't, don't get me wrong. You should always look after yourself, and I would say look after yourself as number one, because if you're performing at your best, you can help others around you much better.
Well, that's why you put a
If
mask on yourself on a plane before someone else if it's crashing.
100%.
I haven't had the
If you look
experience,
after,
fortunately.
yeah, I hope not as well. Touch wood, touch wood. Yeah, it's said you've always got to look after yourself first, because if you can't perform at your best, well, how are you going to help other people in the first place?
Yep.
But if you are in a position then to look after others, I think that's exactly what you should be doing. When it comes to purpose, well, what purpose can you do for for yourself, for self-indulgence? You want to feel fulfilled in this life. I
Yep.
think a lot of men aren't fulfilled in what they're doing, and that is like what you said when you went to that charity homeless thing, is that you felt that what a higher self purpose feels like. You were there and you were like, oh my god, look how good it feels when you maybe go up to a homeless person and give them some money. How good you feel afterwards. Imagine if you can make your whole life and career around something like that. I always used to do a thing when I used to do one-to-one sessions a long time ago now. I used to, of a morning, I'd always go get a coffee, and every morning I'd always pay for the person behind me if there was a person behind me, and I was just done that just to start my day knowing that I'm helping others, and something so simple like that literally just changed my mood. So whether I woke up and I was in a really bad mood for sometimes no reason at all, I'd always do that every single morning just to make sure that it boosts my mood. And because I know that
when you went through that experience, did you, like, if you're in a bad mood and you bought someone else a coffee, did it boost your mood?
100%. It makes you feel as if you were in a bad mood in the first place. It's something so simple, and I've seen it before. I think this was the other day in Starbucks.
Yeah.
And there was two old women getting a coffee, and the guy who had already just ordered, he just literally walked up and he said, "I'll pay for you girls." And little things like that, you don't realize. Not just does it make a difference on you, but imagine how good it makes the other person feel as well. And I think when it comes to purpose, I think it has to involve helping other people. And as I said, that doesn't mean you have to help them directly. It could be said, if you're selling a house, you're helping people buy a house. If you're selling clothes, you're helping people wear clothes. It can work through that. As I said, it's difficult sometimes when I talk about it because people think, well, I don't want to be a fitness coach. I don't want to be I don't want to be a therapist. And I'm like, you don't have to be. I mean, you can help anyone in anything. My client, who's the lawyer, just done a multi-million pound claim to help some people. I don't know, I can't really get into it, but to help some certain type of people, and that is helping people. And it's not to say that he's not going to be successful from that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that was an awakening from my perspective. I come from my grandparents were war refugees, so they come here with a suitcase from Poland and Ukraine and Russia. That's my background. But from that perspective, I had the good fortune when my stepdaughters went to school, was in a very exclusive private school for girls, and through that there was some really, really wealthy people there. But they were wealthy all through. Everything they did was about helping people. Yes, they profitize some of that, if that's the right word. They had businesses, but their business were focused on helping people or providing some value to the world. And that's there's a certain skill to doing that as well. But from that perspective, I noticed that they felt, and I got to know some very, very closely, that that they actually felt very fulfilled with what they're doing. And from my perspective, and you talked about feeling fulfilled. I've had the good fortune of being in a position where I flew to Nice and took a private helicopter. A private helicopter picked us up and took us to Monaco, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But to say it was fulfilling, that's a different thing when you look at that quick fix. And what do you think it from that perspective for guys? It becomes looking for that thing to feel successful, having these external things to feel successful, or is it something that it's better to find within yourself that you feel successful in what you've done?
I think the quick fix mentality and just becoming successful as quick as you can, I think that is caused a lot by what social media is at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think in regards to, if you're a 20, 21, 22-year-old man and you go on social media and you see all these other men, maybe 24, 25, driving around in Lamborghinis, wearing Rolexes, you think, well, what can I do to get there? Because you think that's what life is all about.
Mm.
And so you try and find that quick fix, and that quick fix is normally, for some people, can be selling drugs. For some people, it can be
Bitcoin.
something, well, anything like that. But in the long term, stuff like that isn't fulfilling, and you actually do realize that quite quickly. And even say the male type of role models at the moment. So you would say people like, I'm not sure if you know, but there's like Jocko Willink, there's Andrew Huberman, there's you could even go as far as saying like Andrew Tate and things like that. And they still talk about the fact of, you want to be doing things that are fulfilling and helping other people with things. And the quick fix is going to just not put you in a position for long-term fulfillment and long-term gain either. And how I always look at it is that if you're doing sort of a quick fix, you'll always get the repercussions from it.
Is that, from that perspective as well, because it seems to be, it can happen, and where people say win the lottery, but they fall into two categories there. There's people that have no idea what to do with that, and they get really scared, so they shy it away. And then there's other people that just go crazy and it's gone. Majority of, I think it's something like 80% of people who win the lottery are worse off financially within 3 years. Is that
why do you think that is?
I put it down to, we have an expectation. I believe thoughts are things, and Think and Grow Rich is a book I read a long time ago. And I think who you believe you are manifests itself. So unless you have learnt how to do that, how to manage that, and I know that from my own journey, and where I've made a lot of money then lost it because I wasn't ready for it. And it was only when I was ready for it, then I didn't even have to work hard for it. It just came.
Yeah. Well, you've already done the hard work before.
Well, this is where I wonder about that, and this is where I wonder should be, again, we're teaching guys and women, but we always hear work smarter, not harder, but how many people actually do that?
Yeah, I think you've always got to go through a stage of working hard.
That's not to say don't put in effort.
It's not to say you don't put in effort. I'd say right now I work smart, not hard. But I have had to work hard to be able to work smart. I think,
Is that the learning process that you had to go through, though? You had to go through those. And I wonder about that. Is that, and this is where I really think, I wonder about that from a point of listening. But the reason we work hard is because there are lots, you're 2 mouse clicks away from any piece of advice you want. But we don't listen. And as a result, we're forced to work hard. Whereas and I know from my own experience, even though I was asking people for help, I wasn't really listening. And it was only when I shut up and listened that I actually, and I thought, okay, I don't know everything. And that's where I was wondering from that perspective, is that some of that, we link that back to those participation trophies as well, where we go, hang on a minute, you need to actually step back and listen. And and then
I, I, I,
go ahead.
I think listening is a lost art. I think it's a skill that has to be learned. I used to find myself in a real position where I was probably maybe a couple of years ago a bit more egotistical and
Mm-hmm.
struggle to listen to what other people said. Maybe come across as quite arrogant. As soon as you start, I think for men as well, this is put backwards. Is that asking for help is something that will become across as weak, but it is not. Asking for help is a must. It is a thing that you must do. If you do not know something, you need to ask for help in that situation. From in my experience, you could say, well, how many people do I see on a daily basis in the gym not change over the space of 1 year, 2 years because they just don't know what they're doing? And what would have happened then if you'd asked for help? Well, then you wouldn't be waiting 1, 2 years to even, get
Going back to working harder,
5%
isn't it?
change. 5% change, yeah. And whereas, 100%. So it's like, well, if in my case, if someone, if you invest X amount of money into say a coach, and then all of a sudden 6 months later, you're in literally the best physical, mental shape, everything. Isn't that not worth it than trying to work for 2, 3 years and get nowhere?
Yeah.
And when it comes to things like that, it just blows your mind to think that people won't ask for help. And there's a quote that Ryan Holiday always says, and it's about asking for help is just refusing to give up.
I love that. I hadn't heard that one. That's awesome.
That is, he read it from, I think it was a children's book. And it is true, asking for help is refusing to give up. And this is something I say to men all the time. And it's quite funny that we talk about this because a recent client that just joined me, he said that he didn't want to let ego get in the way of him getting in the best shape of his life. So he thought about joining my program for about 6 months.
Really?
But was putting it off because he thought to himself, I can do it myself.
Yeah.
Then later on down the line, he was like, I think it's my ego holding me back. And I think for a lot of men, not in just regards to fitness, I think that not asking for help and thinking they can do it by themselves is holding them back in so many regards.
Do you think from that, because I love that you brought up ego, because, and maybe I have a different view on ego, because I think ego is a good thing, but a well-managed ego in the sense of, I know I'm a good person. I know I've got talent. But part of that talent is, I mean, you look at the best sports people in the world, they all have coaches. So, and they're the best.
So, and they're the people that everyone looks up to.
And they've got, in a lot of cases, got more than one coach. So, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, they might have, they might have a mental health coach, psychological coach, whichever way you want to call it. And then they've got a fitness coach, then they've got a physio, all giving them advice, which they're listening to. So, and is that from when you look at an ego perspective, is it a balance between going, okay, I'm good. And I look at it from the perspective of, I was reading about the World Championship Toastmaster. He won the championship on the way home at the airport. So, he's left the Toastmaster Championship, just won it at the airport to get on his flight home, went into a bookshop and bought a book on public speaking. And they asked him, they said, you've just won the world championship. What are you doing? He goes, you can always be better.
I was just about to say that. You always ask yourself, yes, I'm good, but how can I get better?
Yeah.
I personally think self-development and self-growth should always be one of the top thoughts in your mind. Of always, how can I get better?
Is that a healthy?
I myself.
Sorry.
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I've got multiple coaches. Yeah. So I know that. My ego was at a point where I was arrogant and I didn't ask for help. Now I'm at a point where I know I'm amazing at what I do. I just want to get better. So I've got my own health and fitness coach. Yeah. I've got my own mental health coach. I've got my own business mentor.
Yeah.
And these things don't come cheap. But I know that I want to become better. So invested myself to be able to do that, even though I know that if I got rid of them all, I'd still do good.
Yeah.
But I know I always want to be better. And in general, I think with men, it's competition is always a key driver. I'd say so. Whether that be you always then will want to be the best in no matter what you do, but you should at least strive for it.
Is that, I mean, because when we talk about that competition, I mean, is that good for men? Is that something, because I wonder about that, and that competition, that drive to be better. You know, it's a balance is where you want to be better, but obviously play within the rules, because cheating doesn't help you. But that drive to be better is where innovation comes from. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, why do men play video games?
Yeah.
Why do particular men play video games? For them, it's an easy way to have that competitive edge without having to put in really the hard work of life.
I'm laughing because I know I'm older than you, and
yeah.
my son who's 14 plays video. It was a couple of years ago anyway. My friend bought one of the re-releases of the original Atari video game, and my son was playing it.
You are old.
He's playing it, and it's like, and then the 3 lives are up, and he goes, "I got to start from the beginning." What?
yeah.
Got to do it all over again.
But it's even then things like why men are still involved in so much sport. You know, you always want that competitive. You always want competition in your life, and I think that when it comes to even things like video games and whatnot, there's no reason why people can't play them and enjoy them. But I feel like people let them take over too much of their life to then not, so they aren't competitive in their own life, in actual things that matter, we'll say.
Is it because too, I mean, you mentioned before, because video games are set up to have that easy win, and obviously you get that little win, you get those dopamine rush, and all that happens. Is it a case where that partly too? I mean, I've played video games. I haven't played in for a little while, but I do. I've enjoyed them in my life. But same token too, is it a case of recognizing that that's fun, but in real life, there's very few people that get paid for playing video games.
Yeah, 100%. And I myself used to, when I was younger, used to play them all the time. And to be fair, not long ago, we're still playing them. But I incorporated a system where I was like, okay, I'm only allowed on for an hour and a half because I've got other more important things to do. And to be honest, now I don't play it at all. But but as you said, it's only like the top 1% would make it in that degree, and you can't sit there and think to yourself that you're going to get there, because once again, then people at the top, they still actually have coaches. even if they play video games,
That's a good point. I didn't know that. That's a good point.
Yeah. That's my knowledge.
So is there a career in being a video game coach?
yeah. Well, I think so. It's not going to be me, but
no.
but once again, but at the same time, we talked about purpose and helping other people. If that's what people have a real passion for, playing video games, there's no reason why you couldn't help and coach them. That is someone then finding their purpose. Yeah, and or that's just a purpose that this century is offered.
What about from the perspective of with you mentioned about asking questions and guys not wanting to ask questions. What about from the other side of things? Because what's talked about a lot is men not being able to express emotions. What have you seen from that perspective, and how do you relate that to being a fully functioning person? Should you express emotions? Should you hold it back? What?
I think there's a fine line. I think the 3 things that I always come back to, as I said, you should always be open, you should always be honest, and you should always be vulnerable. Yeah. But you should be a man in that position to be able to, if anyone tries to ridicule you about any of those things, that you're strong enough to deal with it.
In what way? How would you deal with it?
Just know that you're strong enough to deal with it. For example, if someone was to ridicule you in the way of you being vulnerable about talking about, say I don't know, talking about something dead vulnerable about yourself. Maybe you and your partner have had a divorce and someone comes up and laughs at you or whatever. Do you be in a position to be like, either that you can just deal with it, and the fact that you can just brush it off and be like, I don't really care, or
Yeah,
just
don't care what
battle.
they think yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a degree, because them three things have really, I think, changed my life, because I used to be a person that would hold back and not tell anyone anything. And me being open, honest, and vulnerable changed that. But that's not me being massively emotional and crying all the time and expecting other people to keep bringing me up and keep babying me and being like, oh, Jaleel, you're okay, But it's understanding, like, so for example, in my journey, I've had to be vulnerable about quite a few things, which if people go onto my Instagram, you'll probably see, because I post quite a bit about my story, is that at one point I was addicted to gambling. And for me, the biggest way out of that was being vulnerable and actually telling people about it. As soon as I started telling people that I was gambling, all of a sudden the urge to gamble stopped.
So you cured your gambling addiction by gambling on whether people would like to hear your story.
but basically, yeah. A much better gamble. But for me, it got to a point where, I was addicted to slots, and the slots in a month I'd spent about £15,000 in and out easily, just spinning. And I said, for me, the whole point of being open and honest about things and vulnerable and actually telling people, people used to, like my closest friends used to go to me, you're addicted to gambling. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm fine. Whereas then when I actually started to open up and be like, okay, I am actually addicted to gambling, and telling people that, well, then it kind of got rid of that whole
How did that feel to
it.
open that up when you first did that?
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah.
Whenever you open up about anything, it's going to be tough. When you're vulnerable about anything, it's going to be tough. But you're actually then taken back by the support that you do get.
That's what I was going to ask. That was the next question. Is like,
yeah. Well, I didn't get, obviously, one bad sort of comment about it. If anything, I got more help than ever. And it was one of the biggest things. So I actually have a mental performance coach, and he taught me a lot about being vulnerable and expressing things that are going on in my life and letting people know. And as you said, it's not about being emotional. It's just about, if you are struggling, letting someone be aware of that, but understand that you've got to then put things in place to deal with it. So whether that was me, a breakup, well, I had a breakup not too long ago, and what I looked at, or not too long ago, it's probably last October, November, I looked at it, and me and my mental performance coach were like, okay, what lessons can we learn? How can we go forward from here? It wasn't, I'm just going to sit and cry. It was a tough one for me. It was more about, okay, what can we learn to make sure that I become a better person for the next time? And I think that, well, in general, I think a lot of people just get stuck in that lull, that, emotional circle for way too long. You've always got to look at the bigger picture and what's next.
From that perspective too, when you look at a breakup, for example, for the people listening, I mean, being sad and sorrowful and, my life sucks is not really an attractive quality either, is it? If you're looking
not at all. And don't be wrong, it hurts.
Yeah.
If you've probably been through a heartbreak, it does hurt. But if anything, that power, what my mental performance coach say is dark energy. He said you can use dark energy. You can't use dark energy for too long because it'll exhaust you.
Yeah.
But you can use that dark energy to put you in a place to really build up that good energy, the light energy, for long-term use, for long-term gain.
So Star Wars is wrong. You can cross into the dark side and come back out. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. You come out with a purple lightsaber.
Yeah, so who doesn't want to be Samuel L. Jackson? Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
But from that side of things, when you say that, the dark energy there is how did you go through that transition? How did you go? Okay, how did you use that? What did you need to do?
I think in my mind, instantly as I thought about the end of my last relationship, even though I was the person that say ended it, was that it felt as if I wasn't what I said to my coach. It was like I felt as if I wasn't the horse to be putting money on to win the race. As if I felt as if that I wasn't the person who backed his own word. I wasn't the person who said what he was going to do what he said he was going to. And for me, as soon as that relationship ended, in my mind, it was like I'm never going back to that person that doesn't say that he's or doesn't do what he says he's going to do. So from that moment on, the dark energy was mainly like the motivation to really dig deep in a lot of areas. So, for example, whether that be, for me, you could say I really dug deep on making sure business was its best ever.
Yeah.
And then the light energy going forward now is that I'm in a position now where I've built a really stable base, and now I can just, not relax, but just where you said work smarter, not harder, and feel, and that is then that light energy, I'd say. When you're in this position where you feel positive about a lot of things, and you know that you can deal with any situation that's thrown your way as well.
Yeah. How do you, from that perspective, when you look at it and you go, well, okay, take a relationship, for example, we're on that topic. You go, well, okay, I was with that person, and it didn't work out, and you're feeling that loss, and I mean, I'm relaying it to my experience, thinking, why won't anyone love me? I mean, how do we put that in perspective? Because if you look at it, if you're straight, there's 3.97 billion women on the planet. If you're gay, there's 3.97 billion men on the planet, and if you're bi, you got everybody. There's a lot of people to choose from. When you look at it from that perspective, how does that, how do you keep that perspective in those situations and go, well, there's a bigger picture here that I need to pay attention to?
Yeah, once again, it is difficult. When you're in that position, you're thinking, in your mind, there was only that one person that was going to be that person for the rest of your life. And it's difficult initially. However, you do have to look at that bigger picture, as you said, of look how many, women, for example, there is on Earth. When it then comes down to it, I'd say you can't then go and look at chasing other women. I'd say that's always a bad thing to be doing, or trying to find rebounds or anything like that.
Yeah.
What this position is there for you to do is for you to work on yourself. You've got to realize that if your partner did not want to be with you, or you were not having a good time with your partner, because otherwise you wouldn't have broken up with your partner, then they don't think you were the man that they believed you were. So otherwise they would still be staying with you. If a woman feels like they've got a strong, good partner that is going to lead them to an unbelievable life, then they're going to stay with you. Simple, as black and white as that, or in my eyes, anyway.
Well, that's what I was wondering from that perspective. Is that having that higher? Well, just instead of saying, why aren't they with me? What's wrong with me? Just approaching it from the perspective of, okay, we weren't compatible. So she's, I'm there. It's ideal if you want to have a relationship, and I'm coming from someone that it spent a long time, nearly 12 years, with someone that didn't really like him. I was in a long-term relationship with a woman that, she liked a lot of things, but there's things that she didn't like and criticized heavily. And that didn't get better. Is it a case of you want to identify that quickly and not take it as a slight on yourself, but just, hey, we're not compatible, rather than looking at the other person being a bad person or thing as well? It's just, we're not compatible.
I think you've got to be in that situation and think to yourself, okay, well, how can I learn from this and get better from this to find that right partner when the time comes? You've got to put yourself in the best position to find your best partner. You've got to think of it on the other hand, it's like, well, who do you want your partner to be? If you were, say, if you were the female equivalent of you, would you be happy?
Yeah, that's a good one.
In my situation, I actually look back at it now and I think to myself, there was a lot of things that I wasn't happy with. For example, what I would not now settle for a person that spends most of their day sitting on TikTok swiping up videos whilst I'm sat there trying to grow a business.
Yeah.
And you look back and you think about all these things, and as I said, well, what would have happened if, with the start of that last relationship, if I thought to myself, instead of getting caught up in the whole, sort of like honeymoon sort of period, what if I had thought to myself, Jaleel, would you be happy if this was on the other foot? If would she be happy if I was doing all of this? And the answer to the question is that no. Because imagine if, your partner was seeing you on TikTok all day doing nothing else. You wouldn't be happy at all.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't be happy at all.
So from that perspective, you're saying take that as an insight as to what it is you want, and set some boundaries, and not about telling the other person how they should be, but identifying that earlier.
Yeah,
is that what you're talking about?
And also understanding that you can tell your partner things that you'd want them to improve on.
Mm.
I think that like massively has gone just missed in relationships. Why, if your partner is not doing something to the best of their ability, it should be your job as their partner to tell them, "I want you to do better."
Mm.
I think, especially when it comes to, say, a female to a male, especially, I think on the other case it may be a little bit different. But if you're a man who's maybe underperforming, your partner should be trying to really push you and really keep you to a high standard, especially if they believe in you. But a lot of the times, I think relationships nowadays just aren't really that great, mainly because people don't look after themselves anymore. Is the big one.
So really,
it's crazy because
okay. I was just going to say, because I'm a bit older now, so I'm 50. Yeah. So it's like I'm not sure how works for younger people. So I'm not sure what is out there, and it's so what when you're talking about people not looking after themselves so much, is that where does that? Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Okay, so when I say looking after yourself, number one is that looking after your physical, your mental, and as well, you could say like spiritual to a degree as well. I think you need to be able to have them in a high standard before you can start living a life with somebody else. But when you start living that life with somebody else, well, then that's when you both boost each other at them levels. The issue is that people are going into relationships with bare minimum on all of it, out of shape, mentally the worst, and desperate for the relationship, and then spiritually they're just absolute bricks. So you've got to. So this is something I see from client experience, is when a client comes to me and they get into the shape of their lives, well, what seems to happen is then their partner seems to want to get into the gym, their partner seems to want to get in shape, then it moves then on to others. Like I had a client, and her husband started training with me after she started training with me. Then his son started training in the gym and look after himself and getting in better shape. Yeah, but this is happening with everybody that joins my thing. I have to say to them, who else will this affect? Because you don't realize that if you put yourself at a high level, you're bringing up everyone else's level with you too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people are just sat there within every single day in their lives, and it just being a bit plain, bit boring. So much more for life to offer, and sometimes it takes you, whether you're male or female, to say, I need to get a grip and I'm going to push at a higher level, and then you help everyone else bring up their level with you then as well.
Love that. That's awesome. And from that side of things too, when we talk about, because we talked about asking for help, and if we take that step further with emotions and sensitivity, Because I wonder about that from the perspective of, as a biological being, we have a sensitivity. We have, the ability to sense things. That we have a nervous system, so we can sense things. We have emotions, so we sense those emotions. We hear because we sense sound. We feel love because we sense that emotion. Again, I'm not sure how to define love, and how that works, but I've felt it. From a guy perspective, I wonder about that. Is it a case where, because guys haven't really been taught that this is something that they have, when they start to have those feelings, it becomes overwhelming, so they either push it away, or just discount it all completely, and it becomes something that they try and avoid because they just have no idea how to deal with it. It's so much, when in its raw form, it's so much, so overwhelming.
What you say, the feeling of love and sensitivity,
or any when we're talking about sensitivity in general, it's just because we talk, guys are told not to feel emotions, that kind of thing, and then when they start to feel it, they're like, because they have no concept of dealing with it, when they do get it, they've pushed it down for so long that it's difficult, because when they start to feel it, I liken that to when I long time ago I was learning to sing. Don't ask me to sing because I'm not great, but but I remember doing it, and my singing teacher was talking. What I remember about that was he told me, he says, when you sing, if you do it right, so maybe I did do it right. He said you have these, you might find that you'll start crying for no reason whatsoever, or what seems like no reason, because you're connecting your body to a deeper emotion, and that happens, and that did happen for me. And so I'm just wondering, from that perspective, is it because it is so far removed from what we're expecting, we get scared and push it away?
Yeah, I think we do get scared. I think we do push it away. From past experience, I'd say that you do think to yourself, even something so simple from a question from a partner is like, how's your day been? My answer used to always be fine.
Yeah.
my day was okay.
Yeah.
And I think that is because we maybe don't want to put any stresses on our other partner. But then you've also then got to realize is that if you're open and honest and vulnerable in that situation, that person actually, they use that, when they ask you how, say, for example, how your day is, there's an opportunity to connect to you. And you've got to use that opportunity to give them that opportunity to connect. Because that is also then what basically love is.
Yeah.
I watched, it was a quote, I can't remember fully what it was, but it was about, that is what, love is, two people going through the same struggles together. And if you're, say, for example, if you just say fine, then you're denying the opportunity. But you have to be in a position to be open, honest, and vulnerable to other people to be able to have that sort of situation where you can both go through the struggles together. I think being vulnerable, being open, honest, I think it's a tough thing to learn. But I'd say that if you're in a position where you're looking after yourself in every other degree, I think that they become easy to put into place, because, as I said to you before, then you can, that you can deal with any sort of, hate or anything that may come your way from it, because you're strong enough within yourself. Yeah. And one big point I actually want to go over, and this is something that completely changed my life, is that I think a lot of men need to just go and spend some time alone. And I think, so for example, for me, I went and took a month away in Marbella in Spain. Okay. And
doesn't sound like you were alone.
Yeah. Wink, wink. But me and my mental performance coach talked about it, and he was like, go away for, he was just saying a week or so, and I just thought, I'm going to do a month. I spent this month away, and for me, this month really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I wanted in life. And at this time, I was reading, so there's 2 books that I massively recommend, and if you're doing What Is Manly podcast, I'm guessing you've probably seen or at least read them. The Way of the Superior Man,
yeah,
and Noble Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
And while I was reading Noble Mr. Nice Guy, it actually said, I think one of the third breaking free tasks was something like, go take time away. book yourself a vacation, just you and you on your own. And I'd already booked my flights, and I read that, and I was like, well, I've done the right thing then, haven't I? But that time and just solitude, where you're sitting there on your own at night, where you're having to do everything on your own, going out to restaurants on your own, going out to the beach on your own, going to the gym on your own, going shopping on your own. You've got to be able to, I think a lot of men are too anxious to even do any of those things. Put yourself in a situation where you're in the deep end. I can't just go up to some senorita and be like, excuse me, will you come shopping with me? It doesn't work like that. So you have to do all these things on your own. And once you put yourself in that sort of situation, you come out of it realizing, okay, I can survive on my own. I am happy to live on my own. Once you understand that, then when it comes to coming with a partner, you can be open, honest, and vulnerable, because you know that you can deal with any situation, because you can go out, you can do this, you can do that. You can deal with any stress.
Yeah. Is that a big thing? Because from my perspective, what you're talking about, and I'm pretty sure I was younger than you when I wanted to go to the movies, and my friends didn't want to go, so I went, I'm going, and I went by myself.
Yeah. People don't do that anymore. People don't do that anymore. And I think that's the biggest struggle. I went to the cinema to go see Guardians of the Galaxy the other week on my own.
Yeah.
And people look at you like you're weird. I
Do
go sit in.
or do we interpret? Do they actually look at you, or are we just taking that?
Well, I think I look at it from a different perspective now. But I do think that people do look at you. They're like, because they do get confused because it's something that they wouldn't do themselves.
All right.
So in that situation, I have a lot of clients that come to me, and their whole thing is that they are anxious about just life in general. And this is men.
Yeah.
For example, they couldn't ever think of going to a restaurant on their own. They couldn't ever think to go to the cinema on their own. They couldn't dare think of doing anything like that without their partner or their kids. But yeah, I'd say this is 95% of all the calls I have.
Wow.
And
I know it happens, but I just look at it and I'm just wondering, because I know, I was cafe today, and there's a bunch of guys sitting by themselves, and I know I've done that too. I've just taken my laptop, sat in a cafe, and done some work. It's like, done.
I done it yesterday. But men, especially at my age, I think, because you're brought up with this, people get in relationships from the 18, 19, they don't understand how to be alone, and they don't understand what to do when they are alone. And I think that if you push yourself out of that situation and go solo traveling to some degree, for me, it was only a month away. And to be honest, before that, I've always done things on my own anyway. I just went because I thought my mental coach said it was probably a good thing for me to be doing. And spending that time alone, and you start to just realize that you can deal with all these things by yourself and on your own. I think men, especially early 20s, should be doing as much as they possibly can on their own. Like, for example, if I was to use a situation where, if I ask any of my friends right now who are in relationships, do you want to go get food? They will bring their partner. Yeah. And you should, and this is every single time. It'll be, can this person come? Or can this person come? Well, no. You should be able to have that, I'd call it men time as well. Even if it is on your own, it's still men time. You're on your own. And it's one of the things that I think in No More Mr. Nice Guy, it says, you've got to be spending more time with men.
Because the alone part, again, I'm listening to you and talk about that. And from my perspective, I remember when I was 18 and I was in the army, and I had to go from Melbourne to Perth. And I don't know how to put that in context for someone in the UK, how far that is.
Yeah. And
we'll
just say far.
It's just, well, it took nearly 4 days of solid driving to get there. And I drove by myself. The only downside was when I got there, a friend that I knew he took the flight. He said, "Oh, you should have gone to a backpackers and asked some girl to go with you," but I didn't. So I went myself. But coming to that, back to that. Sorry, I missed I got sidetracked on that story, and there was a point you were talking about before that about being on your own, and what was the last thing you said? I got lost on that. Then mental blank. Come back to it. But this, I mean, ability to have that, to have that time alone. Where do you think that went wrong? What is it, a self-esteem thing? Is it where does that fall?
I believe it's self-esteem.
Yeah.
I would say, a lot of people can't even do the simple things nowadays to build your own self-esteem. Whether it be so simple as just making your bed.
Yeah.
People don't have these self-esteem wins anymore. The simple things that you should be doing, but it sort of sets you up for the day. And you've been in the military, you're taught all of this stuff. I believe nowadays that so many young men just aren't taught the most basic things. Jordan Peterson always says, just make, the first thing that you do, tidy your room, make your bed. So something that's so simple to start building your self-esteem. It makes you feel good. I recently went on a stag do, and nobody made their bed except for me, and I was like, what the hell? So it's not hard. It really is not hard to make your bed, and it just sets you up. And also on that stag do, yes, I went. I don't know if you know what a stag do is, if they do them over in Australia, but yeah. But you say that
we call it Bucks night, same sort of thing. But yeah,
I was saying to someone in the airport, and he was like, "I don't know what a stag do is," and I was like, "Great." But I even went for a run after when I woke up in the morning, straight up went for a run, and people can't even wake up at normal times, even if they've had a drink. And I'm like, you see this world in front of you, and you think to yourself, how are people living at such a low level? And especially when in that situation, I'm the person that's trying to bring everyone else up, because I'm like, okay, wake up at 6:30, shower, out for a run instantly. And I came back from my run, and my run was not a short run. And I came back, and everyone was still asleep. And you think to yourself, how is this? How is this possible? And then it opens your mind to actually. Then you think to yourself, well, what are these people's relationships like? They must be awful. Imagine you're a woman, and you wake up and you see that your partner's still asleep till like 10, 11 a.m. in the morning. You see that you get up and your partner doesn't make the bed. You have to make the bed. When you go downstairs and your partner's waiting for you to cook and do things instead of your partner being up, out, ready, getting things done. I think for you, because you are a little bit on the older side. I
can handle later.
I'm shaking on the mouse.
Back when I was a boy.
But I remember, my dad would be up 6 a.m. If it was his day off, he'd be out in the garden.
He's still up at 6 a.m.
Yeah, well, he'd be out in the garden.
I stayed at my dad's house recently. He gets up because he rings in he's in a little regional town. He rings into the radio station. He gets up, rings into the radio station, tells them what the rainfall has been, because he's got a little rain gauge, and then sometimes he go back to bed, but other times he gets on with it. But he gets up and does that every day.
Yeah, and that's things that should be part of a man's routine. You should, as I said, he'd get up, go straight out in the garden, do the gardening, or whether it be get up, put a suit on, go straight to work. And people just don't seem to have that nowadays, especially on days off from if they work a 9 to 5. The days off are just lazy days, and I want to realize they're the days that you can be putting in more effort to get out of the job that you hate. Is
that part of, again, not having a purpose? You mentioned purpose before.
Yeah, 100%. I think that is one of the main cause. If you look after purpose, well, then you can start directing. Okay, well, I need to do this to get to where I want to be. So if you know your purpose overall, like for example, your purpose is to help people via, say, your clothing brand, just say, for example, well, then you then can outline the steps to where, okay, well, number one, I need a name for my brand. Okay. Number two, what clothes will I be making? Okay. Number three, and you can keep going on and on. You know your plan then. So on your days off, you can then wake up and be like, you can get up at a proper time, go to the gym, do whatever, come back, be like, okay, you're going to do step 1, 2, and 3 today. And you can start taking steps towards where you want to be. But I think then, as I said to you, when it comes to purpose, I think firstly, you've got to put yourself in the best position to find that, which is looking after yourself as your mind, your body, is the first main 2 pillars that have to be looked after before you can start jumping into all of that.
Well, I noticed that, and for an old guy, I notice sometimes if I'm feeling tired, it's because I haven't been doing that exercise. For the old guy that I am,
Well, exactly.
But it is if I'm starting to feel tired, I actually do a bit of movement exercise, mobility routines, and all of a sudden that energy comes back, and it's not much effort. But I was listening to the story you were talking about with the Bucks, the Stags night, and the people sleeping there. And if that's their everyday life, me being me, I'm going, well, what does that do to their sex life? I mean, how much energy are you going to have to? It's like,
well, I also think, and this is a topic that's been brought up on the Diary of the CEO podcast about how many sexless relationships there probably are.
Well, they're saying there's so many men now in their early 30s that have never had sex. Like you can't see it, but my mind's just going, poof. I don't get that.
No, yeah.
I couldn't. Yeah.
Well, I think it's difficult. I think for when you're living at I know it sounds terrible saying it, but I was once that person. Living at that low standard is not going to get you anywhere. What person is going to look at that and think, oh my God, I want to get into bed with that? You've got to, I understand it's difficult. And for some people, they don't change until a specific, say, traumatic moment hits them. But you've got to start taking steps forward. And I would say to people, just before that traumatic moment comes, put yourself in a good position to deal with it when it comes.
Where do you think that comes from? Because again, I don't know why I've done the things that I've done, but it was always, to some level, as much as I had some trauma where, I mentioned sitting in the car, why don't you love me, blah. But I still was always doing something. And that's what I was wondering from finding that person. I didn't know what I wanted to do. A lot of times I was just avoiding doing things. I joined the army because my dad said I wasn't allowed to leave school unless I got a job. The army recruitment people come around 2 weeks later. I went, I'm signing up. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then I got to the army and running around the one bush that Australia has. And it was like, I thought, that's not what I want to do. So I got out after 4 years and did some other stuff. But I was always doing so. So where do you think this lack of motivation comes from? Is it because you mentioned before about not having role models? I know when I was growing up, my dad was always doing something, and I wonder if that was where that came from.
Yeah, I think role models to a degree. I think also that the lack of motivation to do things, I think, just stems from there's no discipline in people's lives anymore. The discipline that you've done something in the army, whether it was not your purpose, it wasn't your purpose. It might have been actually for that time. So obviously purposes.
It was freaking awesome while I was there. I did, jumping out of airplanes and submarine diving.
Yeah, cool.
I was posted to the SAS. I got to do,
But look how much it taught you in the fact of being disciplined. Even though you made your bed beforehand, you would have been taught that. You would have been taught how to, pack your bag. You would have been taught how to get out on time. You would have been taught how to do this, that, whatever. People aren't taught that anymore because their role models now are people that aren't doing that. So, I woke up. It wasn't just my dad. My dad was in bed at 9, read his newspaper, be asleep by 10, wake up to work, go to work at 6, wake up at 6, go to work. My granddad, he was in the army. I'd always hear a shaver going off at like 5 a.m. Shaving, and I was brought up in that sort of situation. But I think nowadays, and I think that's because also my parents, my dad was 76 when he passed. So he was an older generation. And my granddad, when he passed year before last, he was 91 or 92.
Yeah,
so
wow.
that was a generation of where they'd done things like that, and they were, really disciplined in the day-to-day actions. I think nowadays people have parents who are maybe like 30, 40 that don't do anything like that. Their weekends are lie-ins. Their weekends are them lying on a couch watching Netflix. They, and you got to think to yourself that as a child, you don't then realize what is going through that child's mind. I had a client recently, and he said, so I actually met up with him, and we were talking about how his influence, because he has two boys. We told him how his influence plays a big factor, and he said, he was mentioned something about football or soccer, whatever, to his kids, and he then heard his kid go into the other room, play on Xbox, and he mentioned word to word what his dad said as if he was saying it. And that just shows how much children take in of what you're saying. And for him, he was like, I said to him that you got to realize that your motivation, the reason why you're doing this is to set that real standard for your children. Your children, I have another client who goes to the gym, and it comes back, and their children are like, I want to learn how to do pull-ups. I want to learn how to do this. And the children are like young, like 5, 6, 7, and saying this. And if you're putting yourself in that situation as a role, you've got to actually realize that it's actually your duty as a role model to set them high standards, not to turn around and your kids be like, if I use another example, on a weekend when I was off school, if it was anything past like 8 o'clock, my feet would be getting dragged out the bed. But people don't have that anymore.
Do you think that's what helped you turn it around? Because you said you were overweight and then you were losing it. Do you think it was having that foundation that caused you to have that wake up?
I think that sort of stuff helped me going forward. But I think because my dad passed when I was like 13, so I think I had like a lot to deal with during that time, and that's why I ended up, let's say, maybe such a heavy weight, and I lost a lot of that discipline. But now I can see it more than ever, and I get people saying to me all the time that I remind them of him because of my discipline, how I act. But I feel like that is because I can still remember things about what has happened, and I think that has resurfaced. And I think to myself all the time, even though, don't get me wrong, he wasn't in the best physical shape, he still had that discipline, resilience, was successful, authority, all these things that you want as a man, he had. But it's now just taking that to the next level. And you've also got to realize is that your kids should want to be the better version of you. Their goal is to then become better than you. But if you set a high standard, well, they're going to be even better. Then the next is going to be even better. And it'll just keep going and going. Yeah.
Is it a case when we come back to finding your purpose, and you mentioned about, it sounds like what you're talking about is take some action. Doesn't matter what you might not know exactly what it is, but some action. Obviously, you look after yourself. Your health is.
I'd give one action and one action only. Is get in shape.
Yeah.
And for everyone, ask for help to get in shape. There's a million coaches out there. There's a million personal trainers out there. I'd probably say coach is a better situation because you learn more than just what to do in the gym. But go ask for help. Go get the help. But go get in shape, because I've transformed so many lives to the degree of where the jobs they're getting are unbelievable. The career changes they're having are amazing. The business is getting started. The relationships that I've saved. Yeah. It's stupid. It's not the business I'm in. I'm here to get people in shape and perform at their best. But this all happens around it, I had a client of mine within the space of 3 months have 2 promotions. I got a card saying I'm unbelievably grateful because they had to do presentations in front of like a big board, and said that they wouldn't have had the confidence if they weren't in shape and if they weren't feeling good. They wouldn't have had the confidence to have done that. That was 2 promotions. I think the wage gap on that was like 20,000 per annum extra. which is absolutely mental.
It's massive, yeah.
But the fact that they can then do that just because they're in shape blows your mind. And I said that's why the whole point in my program is called Thrive 24, is that it is going to help you thrive in so many areas. Just getting in shape, looking after yourself, building that discipline, that mental resilience.
Yeah.
You know, even it comes to my client who's the lawyer, or who is a lawyer, sorry. One of the biggest things that we talked about was that they found that they were putting in too much work into their work.
Yeah.
But they weren't actually productive during that time. So we then took a step away and was like, okay, set strict boundaries around your work schedule. What happens? They end up becoming more productive in their work schedule, and actually started doing better, and actually got a compliment of a senior member of staff because of it, because of how good their work was. But realistically, that person then had their weekends off where they never normally used to.
Wow.
So you look at all of this and you think to yourself, you know, isn't it crazy how all this can change just by looking after yourself? You know, I couldn't tell people enough is that's the first thing you've got to do, because if your mind, body is running optimal, everything else will follow.
Yeah, I love that. I know you've got to run, so we'll have to wind this up. But
yes,
if you were to put in a nutshell something for the audience to take away as to a framework for being manly, how would you describe that framework?
Framework for being manly, I would say, firstly, is your duty to get in shape. As a man, it is your duty to be the best, especially if you're listening to this and if you're in your 20s, 30s, it is your duty right now to build an absolute beast. To build the most disciplined, resilient, mentally tough person that you can. From there, that'll help you then, if you haven't already, find your purpose.
Yeah.
It'll probably just hit you one day. But you've got to put the foundation, which I would say is looking after yourself, in place. As soon as you've then found that purpose, you're starting to feel more fulfilled. Realize that then you're in it for the long game. And that is, if you ever watched, there's a Simon Sinek video or something he talks about in his books, is the infinite game versus the finite game. You got to realize that this is the infinite game, and that you're here now for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
There will be struggles. It will be tough. If you keep doing what you say you're going to do and sticking to your word, keeping your own promises, you're going to be the man that you've always wanted to become. And everything will fall in place. You will get your partner you want. You will get the career you want. You've got to realize that, you know, to be that man, you've got to then keep the promises you make and just say what you are, do what you are, do what you say you are going to do, and make that your motto. My motto in life is literally, if I'm there, I'm like, do I not believe in myself? Is what I ask myself on a daily basis. If I feel like I don't want to do something, do I not believe myself? Do I go back on my word? No. Go and do it.
Love that, Jaleel.
Boys.
Yeah, amazing advice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, from that perspective too, if you're listening and connect with Jaleel, his contact details in the show notes, so reach out to him as a role model or mentor, especially for the younger people that don't relate to someone older like me. You know,
the people who've got hair.
Exactly. You know, I put that down to too many U-turns under the sheets. You know.
Yeah, that's fine.
So from that perspective, Jaleel, thank you very much for taking time on What is Manly podcast. Very much appreciate it. Looking forward to catching up again in the future.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.